Now, some of what we know about the film we get from witnesses who were in an excellent position to make observations about it. For example, Abraham Zapruder's partner, Erwin Schwartz, said that based upon viewing the film, he saw JFK's brains blown out to the rear. Blown out to the rear. That, of course, is not what we see here. You do see a back and to the left motion of the body, which, interestingly enough, as David Mantic has observed, and Mantic is perhaps a leading expert on the case in the world today, especially in relation to medical evidence. None of the witnesses reported this back and left motion, which Mantic believes was an artifact of the way in which the film was edited and altered to create what we have available to us today. That's also consistent with reports of Secret Service agents who said they were nauseated by seeing the brains and blood splattered across the back of the trunk, particularly when the vehicle was in Washington. Vincent Palomaro, who's the leading expert on the Secret Service, whose agents say to Vince that he knows more about the Secret Service than they do, he recorded a number of these reports of their being nauseated. But the trunk, as you see here in the video, is basically clean, except, of course, we have Jackie climbing out the back, and what most Americans don't know is she was going after a chunk of Jack's skull and brains that was there, but she also held in her hand all the way to Parkland Hospital, and then in the most poignant moment of the history of the assassination, approached the anesthesiologist, Pepper Jenkins, extending her hand and asking, "Will this help?" Jackie knew so much about art and literature, but she knew nothing about neurology or brain surgery. A very interesting development occurred when the Assassination Records Review Board interviewed Homer McMahon, who had been in charge of the color photo section for the National Photographic Interpretation Center, which was then located in Washington, D.C. This was an agency that was responsible for processing satellite photographs. So you get these little tiny photographs that would have to be blown up for study. Well, the capacity to blow up frames and so forth would also be required if you wanted to alter an image in a frame. But what's important about what Homer told us is he said that night, that would be Friday night, he was approached by a Secret Service agent who identified himself as William Smith, who said he had just brought this film from being developed in Rochester and instructed him to study it, to prepare a briefing board of impacts of individuals, occupants in the limousine. He wasn't even to tell his superiors of this task, which he then undertook. He told the Douglas Horn, who became the senior military analyst for the Assassination Records Review Board, that after viewing the film some 10 times, he had determined there were 6 to 8 impacts from 3 different directions. 6 to 8 impacts from 3 different directions. Well, obviously that's very different than what we see here. You see Jack clutching his throat, and of course you see the massive head shot with the blob, etc., but you don't see what anyone would determine to be 6 to 8 impacts. It is, however, perfectly consistent with our research on the medical evidence, where David Mantic in particular, who has both a PhD in physics and an MD in physics from Wisconsin, MD from Michigan, and is board certified in radiation oncology, which is a treatment of cancer using X-ray therapy, and who therefore makes professional judgments affecting the life and death of his patients based on his analysis of X-ray. Has determined, and I'll show you how we know, that Jack was hit 4 different times, and if Conley was hit as many as 3, well, 4 plus 3 would equal 7, which is between 6 and 8, corresponding with Homer McMahon's observations, so we find that very plausible. Interestingly, Roy Truly, who was a Lee Oswald supervisor in the book depository, was right in front of the building, and he has told us, he reported to the Warren Commission, how Greer swung the vehicle out too widely and nearly hit a concrete abutment right in front of the book depository, then had to kind of get back in line, but to his astonishment pulled the limousine to the left into a halt after bullets began to be fired. We now know that from Roy Truly, but a fellow who now runs the JFK research site, Rich De La Rosa, coincidentally has observed what appears to have been an original pre-alteration film 3 different times, and told us what we would find in the film based on all our other research, which confirmed everything we had suspected, including that rear pulled the limo to the left into a halt. Vincent Palomara had also done a study of 59 witnesses who reported the limousine either slowing dramatically or coming to a complete halt, and of course to come to a complete halt, the limousine had to slow dramatically. One of the interesting features that Rich pointed out is that the halting of the limo was quite abrupt and threw the passengers forward. And if you can watch, instead of when Jack's about to be hit, pay attention to Governor Conley and his wife Nellie and Roy Kellerman, who's the agent in charge in the passenger seat, and William Greer, and you'll see they're thrown forward. This is they're being thrown forward in the vehicle at a time when ostensibly the vehicle was accelerating to get out of Dealey Plaza as rapidly as possible. And then of course you see the Conleys disappear onto the ground very, very fast. Now, we have in fact discovered a new proof of alteration of the film. The leading technical expert on the film in the world today, who is responsible for this enhanced version you're observing now, which I have no doubt is a more clear and accurate presentation of the images than you've ever seen before, is John P. Costello, who has a PhD in physics with a specialty in electromagnetism, including the properties of light and the physics of moving objects. And Costello, in doing a collation of witness reports from Dealey Plaza, discovered that the chief of police, Jesse Curry, Winston Lawson, Forrest Sorrells, and several motorcycle patrolmen had observed that a motorcycle patrolman to the right rear, James Chaney, had ridden forward to tell the chief of police that the president had been hit, an event that apparently took place while the limo was stationary. So we have these virtually impeccable witnesses from the chief of police and the two sergeants of Secret Service. We have two other motorcycle patrolmen who confirm it, as well as James Chaney himself, reporting his riding forward to tell the chief of police, who then sent out an alert to Parkland Hospital. This was all before they reaching the triple underpass. And therefore, this is our latest discovery of the alteration of the film, which is, of course, an event that's present neither in the Zapruder film nor in the Nix film, which was taken from the opposite side toward the grassy knoll, and thereby discredits them both. We've also found problems with much more film, too, which covers part of the assassination. Altogether, there are about 8 to 10 films that show some part of what was going on in Dealey Plaza, but the most important in relation to the assassination sequence are the Zapruder and the Nix, and then the much more to a lesser extent. And while the argument has been made in the past that in order to alter the Zapruder, you have to alter these other films too, we indeed have found evidence that these other films have been altered. Anyone who's interested in the whole story here, which I'm merely sketching, might like to look at our book, The Great Zapruder Film Hoax, which contains studies by 6 leading experts on the film, including a 110-page essay by David Lifton on the history of the film. It's quite brilliant. Those who simply have access to a computer should go to assassinationscience.com, and if you scroll down, you'll find about 3/4 of the way down the page a JFK introductory seminar, and there's a piece of mine on disproving the magic bullet theory, a piece by David Manick on his studies of the experts in the National Archives, and a symposium, a tutorial by John Costello on the film itself. So I encourage any of you who would like to go further that you do so just by going online, and you'll be able to pick up. There are other proofs of alteration, by the way, technical ones. They made mistakes in introducing the Stemmons freeway sign and a lamppost when they recreated the film, which had to be done, incidentally. They had to reshoot the frames because of those sprocket hole images. Those are called the ghost images that represent double exposures, which you can't fake, so you had to recreate. And this is why, actually, they had to reshoot all the frames. And you'll find a nice explanation about all these more technical issues and some of the others I've mentioned here in Costello's tutorial. Now, to pick up with what the Warren Commission